The way I usually start the conversation is by talking about infinite, and people generally get excited. And these examples that, or these illustrations of how an actual infinity is not possible, has the potency to ignite that curiosity.
But Asher, as we conclude this wonderful discussion on the common objections to the Kalam, do you have some sort of words of advice? You or I, we are both self-taught. I think in 99% of the time, we are all self-taught. There are instances where we learn from others, but most of the time, we find books, we find resources, we think through. We don't go through any specific curriculum, anything per se. So, what is your word of advice to someone who is planning to learn the Kalam or even use it in dialogue?
Interesting question. I think, Jacob, particularly, you would be getting these questions on SAPT as well. And we often get it on the carpenter's desk as well as individually on on Instagram and Facebook, especially after we began to speak in the Clubhouse platform. A lot of people used to ask this question: how can I get started? There's so much, how can I, especially on these particular arguments like Kalam Cosmological Argument. Sometimes I'm not even, not being able to adequately respond to all of them. But if you are watching this, I think the best place to start is Dr. William Lane Craig's debates. And I'm being very honest. That is because he kind of, when I was back in, let's say, 10th standard or maybe 12th standard, me and my brother Ashish, we used to come back home and switch on YouTube and just be watching these debates. And you would get at least introduced to these arguments, or in this particular case, let's say the Kalam Cosmological Argument, if that's what you want to study, you will get a fair introduction. And then there is Reasonable Fate's excellent repository of both blog articles, Q&As, as well as animated videos and the Defenders series. That again is something that I would highly recommend. I would also recommend this one series that SAPT is doing, because I went through the catalog and there are excellent videos, right, starting from the basics of natural theology and building from there. So if you are someone who has no clue, and someone might even, I remember I recently suggested someone to start with Dr. Craig's On Guard, and he found that difficult. So that is, and I don't really blame a person for that, because Dr. Craig, after all, is a philosopher, and when he's coming down to a layman, it's sometimes even the language can get difficult for especially people in this side of the world. So I would strongly recommend you start watching content like what Jacob and SAPT is putting out. It's a brilliant way to get started in these arguments. And if you want to go deep, right, there are a lot of books out there on the Kalam Cosmological Argument. The one that I would recommend is Andrew Logue's God and Ultimate Origins, because it is more recent and you will get a good review of the both the objections, the key objections that are raised against the argument, as well as the defenses for its premises. And on YouTube, thanks to the time that we're living in, there is a lot of material. Even Dr. Craig himself, he's come on SAPT as well, and several other channels where he's speaking about this particular argument. So in all, there is no dearth of content. And in terms of how to use this argument, I think that this is one of the arguments that I very frequently use in conversations with people who are skeptics. The way I usually start the conversation is by talking about infinite, and people generally get excited. And these examples that, or these illustrations of how an actual infinity is not possible, has the potency to ignite that curiosity. And that's where you track. I spoke sometime back in the workplace to a person who said that she was an atheist, and I just started with the question of infinity, and that's the first time she actually thought about it, that, well, if the past is eternal, you can't get to the now. And I hope that you've already discussed this in the problem of infinity in the series, and that's a good starting point. And from there you can actually build or explain the Kalam Cosmological Argument. It's a very powerful argument, and if it is explained neatly, it has the power to at least nudge a skeptic to consider God's existence. Obviously, the rest has to be done with the help of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great place to come to a conclusion to this very fascinating and fruitful discussion.